Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I have 4 true ghost stories from the Haunted Canada series. If I pronounce anything wrong, I do apologize. Cobourg, Ontario. Mackenzie House is a charming home surrounded by lush gardens on Tremaine Street in Cobourg, Ontario. More than 150 years old. The mansion has been restored to its original elegance and is now a popular bed and breakfast known for serving fine meals. It's also known for some of Cobourg's older residents for having had a few supernatural guests. These folks remember hearing the drone of bagpipes when they played in the house as youngsters, and a few actually saw the piper, Natalie, dressed in a kilt and shiny black shoes, standing on the stairs. A little girl has also appeared on the stairs before running away, as if playing hide and seek, and an otherworldly elderly lady seemed to like rearranging or hiding items in the house, and has even tucked a few unsuspecting guests into bed at night. Today, the owners of the bed and breakfast manor don't use stories about Mackenzie House being haunted to attract clients to the stately home, and they're quite comfortable living in the house themselves. Though they did sense the presence of ghosts in the beginning, they feel they have moved on. But superstitious guests have active imaginations, might want to spend a day or two enjoying more than one scrumptious food and royal treatment bed and breakfast is known for. They might actually book a room in the hope that they could come away with a ghost story of their own. The Ghostly Galley, Placenta Bay, Newfoundland. About 2,800 years ago, the Greeks and Phoenicians started building galleys, large ships propelled by oars that were fast enough and strong enough to ram and sink enemy vessels. These warships had 1, 2, or 3 rows of oars, powered by 50, 100, or 170 men. With the oarsmen rowing steadily, galleys could maintain average speeds of about 10 to 15 kilometers an hour. Yet, no matter how well they rowed, even with the help of a single sail, they would not have set out to cross a large ocean like the Atlantic. They would have perished long before they reached the shores of the Newfoundland. But in the 1920s, centuries after these ships had disappeared into history, a galley suddenly appeared on Placenta Bay, Newfoundland, to the west of the Avalon Peninsula. It was complete with a ghostly crew working 2 rows of oars. Most terrifying still, the ship was on fire. People on shore spoke of how they could feel the fire's heat and hear the unbearable cries of the men aboard as flames engulfed the galley, and yet the ship sailed on until it suddenly vanished. Back then, dozens of folks living in fishing communities around the bay reported sightings of the horrifying apparition. However, it has never been more than 80 years since anyone has seen the blazing vision and heard the mournful cries of the ghostly oarsmen who traveled so far off course in place and time. A Ghost Asks Why, Muskoka, Ontario. Jean Kozokari first saw a ghost in the 1930s. She was a young child at the time, spending the summer at her grandparents' Riverside Lodge in the Muskokas, Ontario's popular cottage country. 2 guests who had just arrived at the lodge were newlyweds, competitive swimmers. They were honeymooning in the area so they could continue training for upcoming national trials. The day they decided to go for a swim was like so many others that summer, warm and sunny, with just a gentle breeze drifting through the trees. Other guests had warned the couple of a dangerous undertow in the turbulent section of the river, but they didn't seem concerned. They strolled down the path hand in hand, waded into the water until it was deep enough, and swam away. Jean was playing outside then. She was still outside some time later, when the husband clambered back up the path, gasping for breath and begging for help. People were shouting and running toward him. Jean was frightened. She was also confused. She could see guests rushing to put boats in the water when the frantic husband told them how his bride had disappeared in a swirling eddy and his desperate search to find her had failed. But Jean didn't understand, because she could also see his wife. The young woman was standing near her husband. She was dripping wet, bent over slightly and sobbing, and in the midst of all the noise and confusion, Jean could hear her moaning again and again, "How could you?" But people were still heading for the river to look for her, and gradually it dawned on Jean that no one else could see her. As dusk fell, the search was called off, and guests slowly returned to the lodge, talking in hushed tones about the missing bride. Her body was never found, but Jean saw her several times over the next few weeks, standing on a small island in the river, wet hair plastered around her face, and doubled over as if in pain. And each time Jean saw her, she heard her cry out, "Why did he do it? I loved him." Jean was too young at the time to make sense of what she saw that summer, but nearly 50 years later, she would recall details of what had happened in A Gathering of Ghosts, a book she co-authored with Robin Skelton, in which she describes several other times she has seen, heard, or sensed ghostly presences. The drowned bride was the first of many ghosts she would encounter over her lifetime, but memories of her often haunted Jean. Had the young woman's death been just a tragic accident, or something much more sinister? A murder? Jean could never forget hearing her plead, "How could you?" that summer so long ago, nor stop imagining what she could have meant. Dead Red Eyes, Clark's Beach, Newfoundland and Labrador. Drowning claimed the life of another young woman whose spirit appears to have lingered her after death. At least that's the explanation given for the terror 3 girls experienced at Clark's Beach on the island of Newfoundland in the 1980s. At the mouth of the North River, Clark's Beach is one of several picturesque towns dotting the southwest coast of Conception Bay. The train no longer runs past the town, but part of the old railway bridge crossing the river is still there. That's where the teenagers were heading when they went for a walk one summer evening. It's also where they had the scare of their lives. As they approached the span, the girls noticed a dark shape perched on it. Getting closer, they saw that it was a young woman in a bathing suit, drying herself with a towel. She didn't seem to hear them coming. Wondering who she was, they took a few more steps toward her. Suddenly, she turned and looked straight at them, and they froze in fright. Her eyes were glowing red like burning coals. Stumbling backward, the girls ran, screaming, from the bridge. Several residents weren't too surprised when they heard about the spine-chilling apparition that had left the 3 teenagers so shaken. According to them, the girls hadn't been the first to report seeing the disturbing visions of the spooky female, and they might not be the last to do so either. Some locals say she is the ghost of a young woman who many years earlier had gone to the bridge to meet her lover for a midnight swim. When he didn't show up as planned, she decided to go swimming anyway, alone. That decision proved fatal, but every now and then she still returns, watching for her lover, probing the darkness with her glowing red eyes. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.